talk about the part of recovery with a bit of performance in it. The version that looks polished in public, but it doesn't actually heal the harm. If you're new here, I'm Bonnie Adams, a licensed therapist, but I'm not your therapist. None of the information in this or any other episode of Off the Beaten Couch is meant to be medical, mental health, or legal advice. If you need immediate assistance, please call emergency services nearest you. Now, some people approach sobriety like a new identity campaign. It's not about repair, it is about rebrand. The story changes from I've hurt people to I've overcome. And if you're one of the people they hurt, that shift can feel very disorienting because everyone else is clapping for their redemption and you are left holding the pieces that never got addressed. Now, I want to be clear, this is not about shaming recovery. Recovery, when it's real, is an act of courage and humility. But when it's used as a shield, it is a way to build power, protect image, or rewrite history. It stops being recovery and it just becomes another tool for control. Let's start with what actually happens psychologically. For people with abusive or narcissistic traits, image is absolutely everything. During active addiction, that image gets damaged. The chaos, the arrests, the fallout. When the addiction ends, the need to restore status kicks in. Lundy Bancroft has written about this pattern. It's what he calls the repentant abuser. It's the phase where the person seems humble and self-aware, but what they're really doing is managing perception. They want to look transformed more than they want to be transformed. Psychologists call this impression management, where they're rebuilding an external narrative to repair a damaged identity. The addiction once fed that need through crisis and attention. Sobriety feeds it through admiration and praise, and it works. Because culturally, we love redemption stories. They make us feel hopeful, like people can change and come back better. But when recovery becomes performative, it is not about healing. It's about regaining control of the story, the reputation, and the power. Now, you've probably seen this dynamic before where an abusive partner or parent gets sober and suddenly they're an inspiration. They talk about their transformation in meetings, on social media, and maybe even in church, and people eat it up. What gets lost is context. They're talking about sobriety, not accountability. They're talking about the battle with addiction, not the pattern of domination, fear, and control. Evan Stark's research on coercive control shows that the driving force behind abuse is not substance use. It is entitlement and domination. When those beliefs don't change, sobriety doesn't fix the abuse, it just removes the excuse. But because recovery stories are powerful, because we want to believe people can change, survivors get pushed to the margins. Their pain doesn't fit the new narrative. Communities often reward the reformed person with praise and leadership and sympathy, while the survivor gets labeled bitter or unforgiving. It is a form of social gaslighting. The story of harm gets overwritten by the story of redemption. And that is the cruelty of performative recovery. It asks the world to celebrate healing that never actually happened. Now, another pattern that shows up here is the use of recovery or therapy language to deflect responsibility. And anybody who's been in a relationship where there is coercive control, manipulation, any type of abuse, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Terms like boundaries, triggers, projection, and healing become rhetorical weapons. Instead of owning harm, the person reframes accountability as an attack. If you bring up the past, they accuse you of living in it. If you ask for repair, they say you're not respecting their growth. Now, it sounds sophisticated and maybe even a little enlightened, but it's still manipulation. Dr. Emma Katz has described this as post-separation coercive control, when the abuser uses new tools, including therapeutic or recovery frameworks, to maintain dominance over the survivor. When recovery language is used to silence, correct, or discredit others, it becomes a new form of control. And because it sounds healthy, outsiders rarely recognize it. They see composure and vocabulary and automatically assume maturity. This is what makes it so insidious. When someone uses the words of healing without embodying the work, it's not growth, it is strategy. It is part of their pattern of control. For survivors, the private reality of this dynamic can be deeply confusing. The world sees transformation, but behind closed doors, the same patterns remain. The manipulation is quieter, more refined, but it's still there. There is still an underlying entitlement, still an expectation to serve the recovering person's comfort, their image, or their emotional stability. The apology never really arrives. The harm never really gets acknowledged. Instead, the survivor is expected to adapt to the new version of the same system. And that dissonance is absolutely exhausting. You start to question your own perception. You think, maybe I am stuck in the past. You wonder if you're the one who can't move on. And that is exactly how coercive systems sustain themselves, by making you doubt your reality. Evan Stark's research calls this liberty restriction, the ongoing limitation of autonomy through psychological means. Even after the substance use ends, the survivor may still find their emotional freedom constrained. This is what it means when we say sobriety doesn't automatically equal safety. In families, this pattern can take another form: the morally superior recovery identity. A parent who's newly sober may begin preaching to their adult children about forgiveness, respect, or spirituality without ever acknowledging the harm done in active addiction. The addiction becomes the scapegoat. That wasn't me. And the recovery becomes a shield. I'm different now, so you need to let it go. For children or partners, this creates a bind. You're told you should be proud and grateful and supportive, but no one's asked what it's like to live in the aftermath. That's not healing. That's the hierarchy. Dr. Judith Herman has written that recovery from trauma requires truth-telling and accountability. Without that, the dynamic just reorganizes. The addict becomes the moral authority and the survivor remains the one who must accommodate. That is how systems protect the person who caused harm while calling it healing. Let's get clear about what real accountability looks like. Now, real recovery centers the people who were hurt. It involves specific amends, not just apologies, but actual behavioral change. It allows others to feel how they feel without rushing forgiveness, and it accepts that repair might not be possible. It also doesn't need an audience. Now, on the other hand, performative recovery focuses on the optics. How does the story look? It equates sobriety with virtue, and it uses self-help language to deflect criticism. It demands validation and forgiveness as proof of progress, and it is louder in public than it is consistent in private. The simplest test is this: if recovery requires other people to disappear, stay silent, or pretend, it's not recovery. For those living in the wake of this, it is important to recognize that confusion is a normal reaction. When everyone around you is celebrating someone who hurt you, your body knows something's off before your mind can name it, okay? You may feel anxious around them even though they're calm now, or at least calm right now. You may tense up when they use recovery language or spiritual phrases. And that's your nervous system remembering the power, not the substance. Now, this isn't about resentment. It's about reality. You can be glad someone got sober and still not feel safe with them. Both things can be true. Recovery and accountability are not the same thing. One is about self, the other is about relationship. If you've watched someone rebuild their image while your truth got erased, you're not being negative. You're just observant. You're seeing that some people stop drinking, but never stop dominating. Real recovery repairs the harm. It rebuilds safety, not image. It earns trust quietly, not publicly. And if you have to disappear for someone else's redemption story to work, that's not transformation. That's still control, dressed up as healing.